You think you know the quiet ones. The ones who sit in the back of the class, whose footsteps make no sound, whose voices are barely a whisper in the crowded hallways. You think their silence is weakness, an invitation, a blank canvas for your own noise? You are wrong. So terribly, dangerously wrong. Because inside that silence isn't emptiness. It's a storm built from discipline, from loss, from a love so fierce it forges strength in the deepest, darkest parts of the soul. This is the story of one such silence, and the arrogance that shattered it. If you understand that the most powerful forces in this world are often the quietest, then subscribe, because you're about to witness what happens when a storm is finally unleashed. The late afternoon sun bled orange and gold over Northwood High, a quintessential American school with its red brick walls and manicured football field. The air in the courtyard was warm, thick with the scent of cut grass and the lazy hum of a school day winding down. It was a picture of peaceful suburban life, a scene playing out in thousands of towns across the country. On a weathered wooden bench, tucked away from the main throng of students, sat Elara Vance. She was the new girl, a transplant 2 weeks into her senior year, a ghost in the bustling ecosystem of Northwood. Her uniform, a white blouse and a short, pleated skirt, was impeccably neat, as if pressed with a military precision that defied the usual teenage crumple. Her posture was ramrod straight, her hands folded in her lap, holding a single, pristine apple. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail, not a single strand out of place. And her face was a masterpiece of control. But if you look past the neutral set of her mouth, into the storm, gray of her eyes, you could see the ghosts dancing there. You could see the effort it took to remain still, to be calm, to just be. She was tracing the patterns of the clouds, trying to lose herself in their fleeting shapes, trying to remember her father's last words to her before he shipped out. Be the calm, Elara. Not the storm. The storm is a last resort. It's for survival. Your life here, that's for living. The calm was about to be tested. They moved through the courtyard like they owned the very sunlight. Their laughter a loud, discordant jazz in the mellow afternoon. Jake, Mark, and Tyler. Their blue and yellow varsity jackets were their armor, their swagger their weaponry. Jake, the quarterback with a smirk that had never been wiped off his face, led the pack. He was all blonde hair, blue eyes, and a cruel, unearned confidence built on a foundation of touchdowns and parental indulgence. Mark, lanky and sharp-faced, was his loudmouth echo. Tyler, broader and quieter, was the muscle, his silence more menacing than Mark's chatter. They were bored. And Elara, the new, quiet thing, was the most interesting toy in the sandbox. Well, look what we have here. Jake's voice cut through the air too close, too loud. He planted himself directly in front of her, blocking her sun, casting her in his shadow. The library ghost decided to get some air. What's the matter? Book's not talking back to you today. Elara didn't flinch. She didn't look up. She took a slow, deliberate bite of her apple. The crunch was deafening in the space between them. She focused on the simple act of chewing, on the sweet tang of the fruit, on the feel of the warm wood of the bench beneath her. De-escalate. Do not engage. They are not the enemy. They are children. Her father's voice, a steady drumbeat in her mind. I'm talking to you, Jake said, his smile tightening at the edges. Her indifference was a language he didn't speak, a challenge he didn't understand. He nudged her book bag with the toe of his expensive sneaker, leaving a faint scuff mark on the dark canvas. A violation. Small, but intentional? You deaf or something, or just stuck up. A mark circled around to her side, a hyena looking for an opening. Maybe she's simple. Like, can't form words. Heard she lives in that crappy little house over on Maple. Probably doesn't even have a flat screen. A small audience was gathering by the water fountain, a cluster of students in identical uniforms. They whispered, their eyes wide, a cocktail of shock and a guilty fascination. They knew this dance. They'd seen it before. They'd been on the receiving end of it, or they'd been relieved it wasn't them. Today it was Elara. They watched, but they did not move. It was the law of the jungle, and Jake was the apex predator. Elara finally lifted her head. Her gaze was not fearful. It was analytical, scanning, assessing threats and angles. It was the look her father had taught her, the situational awareness look. I'm from here, she said, her voice low and even, devoid of the tremor they expected. Now, I'd like to finish my lunch in peace. The word peace hung in the air, a fragile, foreign concept. Jake barked a laugh, a harsh, empty sound. He looked back at his friends, a king seeking validation from his court jesters. "Oh, she's from here? How exciting for us!" He leaned in, his face so close she could see the pores on his nose, smell the stale coffee on his breath. "But you see, around here, new people make friends. They show a little respect. They don't sit on their throne like some kind of silent, judgmental queen." His eyes dropped to the apple in her hand. It was a symbol of her peace, her simple moment of solitude. With a flick of his wrist, so fast and so petty, he smacked it from her grasp. The fruit flew from her hand, hit the gravel with a dull thud, and rolled, collecting dirt and bits of dead grass. The world stopped. Elara's entire body went preternaturally still. It was not the stillness of a frightened rabbit, but the stillness of a panther in the split second before it pounces. The air around her seemed to grow cold. The careful, painstakingly constructed dam inside her, the one that held back a lifetime of goodbyes, of sleepless nights waiting for a phone call, of learning to patch wounds and set bones, instead of doing algebra homework, began to crack. The ghosts in her eyes were no longer dancing, they were screaming. Her hands, still folded in her lap, clenched into fists. The skin stretched taut over her knuckles, white with strain. The moves played out in her mind like a brutal, efficient film reel. A palm heel strike to the nose, shattering cartilage. A dislocating knee bar, a chokehold that would put him to sleep in 8 seconds. It would be so easy, so satisfying. But her father's face superimposed itself over Jake's smug features. Not the stern drill instructor, but the man with laugh lines around his eyes. The man who'd taught her to waltz in their tiny living room. Whose voice broke a little the last time he said goodbye. "Your strength is a gift, Elara, not a weapon. You use it to protect the weak, not to punish the stupid. The battle isn't always about winning. Sometimes it's about choosing not to fight. Your pride isn't worth his life." She took a breath. It wasn't a shaky gasp. It was a deep, diaphragmatic breath, the kind she took before lining up a shot on the range. She filled her lungs, held it for a 3 count, and let it out slowly. She deliberately, painstakingly, unclenched her fists, laying her palms flat on her thighs. She looked from Jake's gloating face to the ruined apple in the dirt, and then back to him. The storm in her eyes had been forced back behind a wall of sheer, unbreakable will. "You shouldn't have done that," she said, her voice dropping to a register that was barely audible, yet it carried the chill of a coming winter. Jake misinterpreted it all. The breath was a sigh of defeat. The unclenching hands were surrender. The quiet voice was fear. He was blind to the monumental control she was exerting. He puffed out his chest, the Letterman jacket straining. "Or what? What are you going to do, quiet girl cry? Run and tell Mrs. Henderson?" He sneered, gesturing around at their captive audience. "This is my school. You play by my rules. And my rule is that you don't disrespect me by ignoring me." Arrogance, her father always said, was the greatest weakness. It made you blind. It made you stupid. And it was about to make Jake fall. He reached out again. This wasn't a flick or a nudge. This was a deliberate physical act of domination. His hand, large and calloused from football, moved to shove her shoulder, to knock her off balance, to finally break her and establish his supremacy in a way everyone could see. It was the final irrevocable mistake. As his hand moved toward her, Elara's world narrowed to a single hyper-focused point. The background chatter of the students faded into a meaningless hum. The rustle of the leaves in the oak trees became the sound of her own blood pumping in her ears. The sun's rays seemed to converge on them, a cinematic spotlight on the moment everything changed. She didn't choose to react. Her body, trained through thousands of hours of drills, of muscle memory forged in stress and discipline, simply took over. Her left hand came up, not in a wild, swinging slap, but with the blinding speed and precision of a viper. Her fingers closed around his advancing wrist, her thumb digging mercilessly into the nerve cluster on the underside. It wasn't about brute strength, it was about leverage, anatomy, and pain. Jake's eyes, which had been full of mocking triumph, bulged in shock an instant. White, hot agony. A strangled yelp, utterly undignified, escaped his lips. He tried to pull back, to yank his arm free, but her grip was an iron vise. She wasn't even straining. "What the hell?" Mark shouted, taking a threatening step forward. Elara's head snapped towards him. The look she gave him was not one of anger, but of cold, terrifying finality. It was the look a hawk gives a mouse. It was a promise of utter ruin. Take one more step, she said, her voice now clear, sharp, and laced with steel. And I'll break it. Mark froze mid-step, his bravado evaporating like mist in a desert. The raw, undisguised power in her voice, in her eyes, was something he had never encountered. It was real. It was adult. It was deadly. She turned her attention back to Jake, who was now bent over at a painful angle, his face ashen, sweat beading on his forehead. She applied a subtle, twisting pressure, a classic wrist lock, and his body had no choice but to follow. He grunted, a sound of pure humiliation, and dropped to one knee in the gravel, his free hand splaying out to stop his fall. The courtyard was utterly, profoundly silent. You could have heard a pin drop. The students by the fountain were statues, their jaws slack. The girl who had been pretending to text on her phone was holding it, forgotten, her thumb hovering over the screen. The world had tilted on its axis. The quiet new girl had the most popular boy in school on his knees, defeated by a single, graceful hand. You talk about rules, Elara said, her voice low but carrying into every corner of the frozen scene. You have no conception of what rules are. Your rules are a childish game, a pathetic contest for a throne made of sand. She leaned down slightly, her voice dropping to a whisper meant only for him, yet it sliced through the silence. My rules were written in the dust of Kandahar and the blood of Fallujah. My rules are about coming home alive. My rules were taught to me by a man who has forgotten more about courage and sacrifice than you will ever know. She released his wrist with a small, contemptuous shove. Jake collapsed backward, landing hard on his backside, clutching his throbbing arm to his chest. He stared up at her, his eyes wide with a terror that was entirely new to him. It wasn't just the physical pain. It was the psychological demolition. He had been not just beaten but unmasked. The king was a naked, shivering boy. The neat uniform, the perfect posture, the unshakable composure. It all clicked into a terrifying new reality. This wasn't weirdness. This was a different breed of human being entirely. Who are you? Tyler stammered, his voice small and broken. Elara stood up. She wasn't tall, but in that moment, she seemed to eclipse the sun. She picked up her book bag, and with a slow, deliberate motion, she brushed the scuff mark left by Jake's shoe. The gesture was filled with more disdain than any curse word. She slung the bag over her shoulder, and it was then that the crowd noticed the small, worn patch sewn onto the front, one they had all overlooked. It was an insignia, a ranger tag. My name is Elara Vance, she announced, her voice ringing out, no longer hiding, no longer containing the storm. It was a voice filled with pride, with pain, with a legacy that demanded respect. My father is Master Sergeant Kalen Vance, 75th Ranger Regiment. 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, a Silver Star and 2 Purple Hearts. He taught me how to field strip a rifle in the dark, by touch alone. He taught me how to apply a tourniquet to a femoral artery bleed, with 60 seconds on the clock. He taught me how to read a map by the stars, and how to survive in the woods for a week with nothing but a knife and my wits. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle like stones in the hearts of everyone listening. And yes, he taught me over 24 ways to disarm, disable, and if necessary, kill a threat. He didn't teach me these things for a grade. He taught me them so I could have a chance at a life in a world that isn't always kind. A life he fights for every single day while you play your little games. But she took a single step towards the cowed trio. Jake scrambled backward on his hands and heels, a pathetic crab walk away from her. The next time you think about using your strength to intimidate someone who has none, she said, her eyes sweeping over all 3 of them. I want you to remember the feeling of your wrist in my grip. I want you to remember the taste of gravel on your knees. I want you to remember that your strength is a hollow, fragile thing. The only reason you are still conscious and unharmed is because I possess more discipline and honor in my little finger than you will ever have in your entire, privileged lives. Now, get out of my sight. She didn't wait for a response. She turned on her heel and walked away. The crowd of students parted for her, not just moving aside but bowing back, creating a wide avenue. Their eyes were no longer fearful or curious. They were filled with awe. They had witnessed something biblical. She didn't look back. She walked towards the school building, her stride long and confident, the late afternoon sun casting her long, singular shadow ahead of her, a silhouette of a legacy that could not be bullied, could not be broken. The aftermath was a seismic shift in the culture of Northwood High. The story didn't just spread, it became legend. Whispers of Ranger Girl echoed in the hallways. The dynamic of power was irrevocably broken. Jake, Mark, and Tyler became ghosts themselves, pariahs shrouded in the humiliation of their very public downfall. They weren't targeted or bullied in return. That wasn't Elara's way. They were simply ignored, their former power exposed as the empty shell it always was. The casual cruelty that had been a currency at the school lost its value overnight. People started thinking. They started speaking up for others. A strange, new respect settled over the student body, born not from fear, but from witnessing true, unadulterated strength. A week later, the story reached its final chapter. The final bell rang and students streamed into the parking lot. Among the rows of sedans and compacts, a dark, sturdy SUV stood out. It was clean but showed the faint scratches and dust of real use. Leaning against the driver's side door was a man. He wasn't tall, but he was built with a compact, dense power that made him seem larger. He wore simple jeans and a plain black t-shirt that stretched tight across a broad chest and powerful shoulders. His hair was cut short, his posture was ramrod straight, and his arms were crossed over his chest. He wasn't doing anything, just waiting, just watching. It was Master Sergeant Elara Vance. The students who saw him knew instantly. It was in the way he held himself, the same effortless, grounded grace as his daughter. It was in the calm, assessing gaze that scanned the crowd, missing nothing. It was in the quiet aura of contained power that seemed to radiate from him. This was the source. Jake, walking out with his head down, saw him. Their eyes met across the hoods of cars. The sergeant's gaze was not angry, not threatening. It was simply knowing. It was the look of a man who had seen the abyss and recognized its reflection in the eyes of foolish boys. In that one brief glance, Jake felt a shame so profound it was a physical pain. He saw the honor, the sacrifice, the immense weight of the real world, and he understood completely and utterly how small his own kingdom had been. He quickly ducked his head and hurried away, the lesson finally truly learned. The school's double doors swung open and Elara emerged. For a moment, she was the quiet girl again, her book bag slung over one shoulder. Then she saw her father. And the most amazing thing happened. The last vestiges of the soldier's daughter, the disciplined mask, melted away. A radiant, genuine smile, the first anyone had ever seen, broke across her face, transforming her completely. She was just a girl. His girl. She ran the last few steps and he opened his arms. He wrapped her in a hug that was both immensely strong and infinitely gentle. It was the hug of a man who held the world at bay, so his daughter could have a moment of peace within it. He kissed the top of her head, and for a moment, they were just a father and daughter, reunited in a parking lot after a long day. As they drove away, the SUV disappearing into the tree-lined streets of the town, the school behind them seemed to shrink, its dramas and hierarchies rendered small and insignificant. The battles fought on its grounds were mere shadows of the battles her father faced, and the battles Elara fought within herself every day. But she had won this one, not by becoming a bully, but by revealing a depth of character and strength that redefined the very meaning of power for everyone who witnessed it. The story of the soldier's daughter is a testament to the quiet battles fought every day by those who carry legacies of sacrifice. It's a reminder that true strength is found in control, in discipline, and in the choice to be kind, until the moment you are forced to be anything but. It's a story that echoes in the silence of those who understand that some storms are too powerful to be unleashed. And it leaves me wondering, as I share this with all of you, about the untold stories of strength and silence in your own communities. From which part of the country are you watching this video? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one.